What is up, Brad fans? How you doing? Glad to have you here. We have another episode of with a political persuasion. We got the panel of dudes from Canada back. We actually have the full panel this time, at least for half of it. Steve did have to leave to view the Masters and drink margaritas on a Sunday afternoon, and we don't fault him for that at all. But Steve, Scott, and Coleman were here to talk about this, the last gasps of the Trump administration. We speculated on what we think the end game is. What are some of the scenarios that could play out with Iran? A few other things. Milk that content out of that last, what is it, 60, 70 days of the Trump administration. And then we had a really interesting conversation in the middle about Trumpism, populism, the sort of rhetoric, media landscape that we see in the US and how that's creeping into other places. Mainly Canada. We focused on Canada. And it's something that, gets me all fired up to think about how we need to, engage with more policy and less rhetoric and other BS. And I would hate to see the country that I live in, Germany, or my homeland of Canada, fall into this trap. But it's I don't know. For me, I think it's on the horizon. It's something to watch out for. So we had a really great talk about that, and then we wrapped it up talking about what we think the Biden administration can do, specifically with coronavirus, and how he's going to have to navigate some of the internal divisions in his party. So take a listen. I hope you enjoy. If you disagree, agree, enjoy, don't enjoy, let us know on Twitter, Instagram, @2BradForYou. You can hit me up at bvanparadon. We also have a show email now, 2bradforyou@gmail.com. The website, 2bradforyou.wordpress.com. As always, rate, subscribe, follow on wherever you're getting your podcasts. Leave a comment. That does help us out. But yeah, otherwise, Twitter, Instagram, @2bradforyou is probably the best way, or the email @2bradforyou @gmail.com. So thank you all for listening, and here we go. All right, folks, we're back to milk the last little bit of content we can out of the Trump administration as this drags on until January, at least. Of course, today we have the whole panel of regular, ordinary gentlemen, citizens, college-educated voters, we'll say. And I guess we can say for the first time in this Two Brad for Politics show, we're all gainfully employed at the time of recording. So I'm looking at you, Coleman. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
For as long as time as I may have left, I will be gainfully employed. And I'm very proud of that.
Have you joined Trump's legal defense or
Yeah, I'm going to be hosting a press conference in front of Four Seasons Tailoring here in Edmonton, Alberta.
perfect?
All right. Wow. So as you heard, Scott's here, Coleman's here, and Steve here. You're sorted out on your end.
Yeah, guys, what's happening?
Okay, good. Not much. Well, let's jump into it. I mean, the latest it appears with the Trump administration. I guess we still have to call it an administration for a while. The lawsuits don't seem to be working. I think they're 0 for 12 last I saw in terms of any lawsuit contesting any portion of the election. Most of these lawsuits seem to be kind of just small matters of procedure and stuff like that. Nothing that would invalidate or overturn any votes. There's been a couple other speculations about states going against the will of their popular vote in their state and just deciding who the electors will elect when they send them to the electoral college. Doesn't look like that's going to go through. But the crying continues. I don't know if it's I've heard a number of different theories as to why this is going on. Everything from Donald Trump is just that petty and cannot, leave with conceding defeat, to he's trying to shred all the papers in the White House that would implicate anything this administration has done that's less than above board. Let's go, Steve. Why don't you start it off? What do you think Uh, is there a strategy behind this? Is it actually, do they actually think they're going to overturn the election, or is it just stretch it out as long as possible?
Just a bunch of gas. Yeah, it's what there's not a strategy. There's always a motivation or like an appetite, you could call it. But well, the one that I kind of agree with that I've heard, they covered this on the Preet Bharara podcast the other day, was that he's basically the strategy or motivation or whatever you want to call it is that he is just laying the groundwork to stay relevant. And the only way
Mm,
he can do that is by claiming this is a hoax, fighting the fight. He'll have his millions of followers believe him. He's got Fox News. He's got his own senators still backing him for God knows why. It's got to be fairly apparent to them right now that he's lost his presidency, but they don't see him as a sinking ship, and he doesn't see himself as a sinking ship. Of course, a gaseous giant would never sink. He's going to float around, and we'll still point up at him every once in a while. He's going to bounce around with the wind and kind of blend that with whatever way the gas is leaking to propel him, whatever direction. And we'll just continue to see him. And, he's probably thinks in his head that he's going to be president again, be it in January or in 2024, or that he just wants to keep this movement alive, and continue being in the spotlight because that's what he feeds on, that and Sudafed.
right. Of course. We
Yeah.
established that last episode. Gas giant powered by Sudafed. Um, Scott, I'll go to you next. I mean, I think what Steve said makes a lot of sense, in that he's trying to stay relevant. We've seen him to kind of turn against Fox News at the moment. But do you see him as like a viable, maybe he doesn't run in 2024, but is he still like, the Republican kingmaker? Like whoever he blesses will get the nomination in the next presidential election. And this is why these senators are still, hanging on to him.
I think Steve, you're right in that this is all kind of a bit of theater to maintain relevance as soon as, at the end of the day, January 20th will come. He will no longer be president, whether he accepts it or not. But I think there's a few things going on, right? He wants to stay relevant, I think, in part so he can keep sending those angry fundraising emails for,
Right.
however long he can get away with it. I would not be surprised if he declares shortly after January 20th that he's going to run in 2024. I don't think he is going to run in 2024, but I think that does a few things for him. He can keep sending the emails, keep the money coming that then goes to God knows where. Um, Also, I think it'll help him with his potential legal issues that then once he's declared himself a candidate for 2024, he's going to say, they're just coming after me. It's all political. It has nothing to do with the years and years of tax fraud I've committed or anything like that. It's because I'm a 2024 candidate. Um, I also think it's largely an ego play that he just psychologically is not built in such a way that he could accept the idea that he lost. So he needs to sort of create this elaborate fiction about how the election was stolen from him. And I think the entire Republican Party has just adopted their role of daycare teacher, toddler minder, that they say, okay, if you tell little Johnny he won, then he'll stop screaming and throwing his poop on the walls. So we're just going to entertain him a little bit longer until on January 20th, his mommy's going to come and pick him up and then it'll all go away. Um, so I think and as far as being kingmaker, I think absolutely I could see. I really hope they just ditch the primaries and go apprentice 2024. Donald Trump, picks ratings will be huge. Mark Burnett will be all over this. And
Yeah.
I could easily see how the apprentice presidential candidate is going to be a ratings bonanza for OANN.
Right. Or, we'll go to Coleman now for, because I know, Coleman, you've expressed interest that if Trump, created his own media channel, you would be the first to subscribe, correct?
Yeah, and I think I could definitely change every part about my personality to be a good host on that show. Um, I have very few qualms about lying to get ahead in the media game. That's what I do on this show most of the time. Yeah, I kind of think that's what his plan is. Um, I did notice there was definitely a couple days of like hesitancy on guys like Lindsey Graham and like Mitch McConnell to come out and support Trump in these like crazy claims. I think there was some discussions about cutting him loose, but then the Senate races in Georgia are going to be so important that they can't afford to have Trump turn his cult base on them so
Right.
early. So I think there was a hesitancy, but it'll be interesting to see after those races are done, kind of how they treat Trump. And another thing I think he has on his side is like just the way that this election was counted. It gave it the illusion of being closer than it actually was.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of adds legitimacy. Like his supporters can go back and like one of the big talking points is, well, he was leading on the evening of the Tuesday. Like, how could all these votes just appear out of nowhere? It's like, well, technically they didn't appear out of nowhere. Those were actually before everyone else's votes. You can make an
Yeah.
argument that Biden had a huge lead going into the election day,
Yeah.
but just the way things happen with Trump, that he gets these breaks to make him stay relevant, that they have this election that's not counted differently, but interpreted differently than most elections, and makes it seem like it was a close race where it really wasn't. It wasn't a landslide. I thought it was going to be more of a Biden victory, kind of from what I said last time. But yeah, so he's just kind of out there doing Trump things. The Republicans kind of have to go along with it for these Senate races that are going to be very important, and we are forced to listen to this fucking idiot talk for another 2 months.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the Senate races, I guess they go to a runoff election. So is there two potential Senate seats available in Georgia that could still go to the Democrats and that would flip the Senate, I
Yeah, well,
believe,
it would
just to contextualize.
if the Democrats won both, there'd be a tie in the Senate, and then
Okay.
the VP's the deciding vote after that. So they need to win them both, and then they control the Senate through the VP vote.
Right. Okay. So important. So obviously, yeah, the Republicans don't want to give up the fanatical Trump base or piss off the fanatical Trump base, and we all know how petty he is. The other interesting things I saw was the firing of the Secretary of Defense. Was that it, or National Security Advisor? I can't remember which one.
No, I was Secretary
Secretary
of
of
Defense.
Defense, yeah.
Secretary of Defense, and then there was also some positions within either the defense apparatus or homeland security, cybersecurity positions that they just gutted as well. They fired a bunch of guys. One guy actually came out. The Associated Press or Reuters was reporting that he knew he was going to get fired, and he had gone against the wishes of the White House to say that the election was fair and that they didn't detect any problems and there was no interference or anything like that. So that seems kind of odd to me. They also, I think, I mean, I've heard speculation on it that this is a way to sort of maybe ram through some last minute foreign policy stuff as they go out the door, or like I said in the opening as well, maybe they're just trying to get some more administration friendly people in to sort of cover up some of the things that may have been going on. Anybody want to jump in on that? What they think, yeah, whether it's Iran loading up some other sanctions or something on them, getting some more arms deals through?
I think it's mostly the latter. My guess would be all these lackeys have been put in to, fire up the shredders, wipe some servers, get, a few sketchy calls with foreign leaders off their secret server or, whatever they've got. Because I think as far as foreign policy goes, like Trump doesn't really care. I don't, he only cares about things that affect him directly. So, more sanctions on Iran it's hard to imagine that's really going to motivate him at this point versus trying to cover up some pretty criminal acts that have potentially happened. I could see would be a highly motivating factor for a mob boss like Mr. Trump. So it just seems to me the idea that he's got some high-minded ideals of in the last second trying to remake the world in his image. Like it seems to go against what I've seen of the man in the last 4 years. Like he just doesn't care. He doesn't care about things that don't directly affect him. So my guess would be it's more of a kind of cover up on the way out the door operation, but I could be wrong. Who knows? They could
But
be bombing tomorrow.
some of the stuff with Iran could affect him because of his ties and Jared Kushner's ties to the Saudis. And you know, if this could be, hey, we'll do this last thing on the way out the door and just make it really if difficult, if not impossible, for Biden to get back into the nuclear deal, and screw over Iran for you. But just know that, you know, when we get kicked out of here, we're going to need millions of dollars to, you know, fight for the legal cases against us, or we're going to need some kickbacks in some kind of way. I mean, there's still a way that it could benefit Trump.
Yeah, but make make no mistake that Trump would listen. He would drop son-in-law top advisor Jared Kushner to save himself in a second. You know,
Well,
he's not
100%.
he's not making moves to um, kind of help Jared Kushner, only to
No,
help
I'm saying
himself.
he's using Jared Kushner's ties with the Saudis to, you know.
Sure. Yeah. No, I understand what you mean, Brad. I'm kind of more leaning towards what Scott was saying, that this is all just. I mean, he's ideologically empty, an ideologically empty vessel, so to speak, and but he is most notably a bitch. So he probably made a call to fealty, and people, you know, these people supported him, and these people didn't, and he was just like, okay, well then you're fired.
Yeah.
That's more so my guess, that he's back there making moves. Um, I don't know to what extent he's uh, even capable of kind of playing this kind of one move ahead checkers that you're describing.
But I mean, there's people around him though too, right? Like he's still got these other figures that would benefit from this or that have the ideological bent, Stephen Millers and guys like this, you know, like there's still those people that are around him
Yep,
that
that's
want to
true.
get you know, get the last uses out of the useful idiot.
And he is influenceable, like you said. So yeah, it's a good point. I think we'll have to wait and see kind of how all that works out. I can't imagine it works out well for him, but we'll see.
Coleman, what do you think? You know, I think we're all in agreement that it's like he's a vindictive, petty man. This could be another option, is that he wants to screw over the Biden transition as much as possible, and one way to do that would be to fire a bunch of people that wouldn't necessarily need to be replaced in a transition. But if they are fired, they would need Senate confirmation hearings and all of this other thing to bring them back. So it just like it could really set behind the transition, and not to mention that they're just refusing to even start the mechanics of the transition. In your you know, armchair psychology estimation of the man, should we expect some some petty shit flinging on the way out?
Yeah, I fully expect for him to actually smear his own shit, sorry, on the walls of one of the bathrooms in the White House before he leaves. Um, yeah, basically, they've already put the federal government behind the eight ball, just the way that they've run their administration. Like they've left a lot of important roles empty for a long time.
Hmm.
And I think that's just going to continue. The Esper firing the defense secretary, that seems like, because he actually pushed back on the use of the military and that Bible photo op that they took where they gassed the
Yeah.
protesters. He publicly pushed back on that. So he was expecting to get fired after the election anyway. He already had
Yeah.
a resignation letter drawn up. So I think a lot of these firings are kind of Trump. Just he likes to fire people and he wants to look relevant at the end of the day. But yeah, I fully expect him to do everything he can to fuck with the Biden transition team until the very end. We've already seen like France announced that when Pompeo visits them, like they're going to give a complete readout of the meeting to the Biden transition team. So the French government is doing more to help with the transition than the acting president. I don't expect him to concede or do anything. I expect him to be loud and awful and not help the Biden team. Thankfully, like, Biden has been in the White House, so at least he can tell people where their offices are going to be without having to show them like a tour or anything like
Yeah.
that. I expect, Trump just to be a dickhead until January 2nd and then leave and then say that he won and all that. But yeah, he will do a lot of stuff between now and election day to like weaken the federal government. It's just the way he is. It's what he's done for 4 years. I don't expect it to stop now. We have a new scandal from this administration every week, and we have several weeks left, and I expect a fresh scandal to hit our desks every Monday to peruse.
Yeah, I'm waiting for Rudy Giuliani to pop off with some more greatness.
Any Rudy stuff I'm in for, 100%. Love Rudy. He is the weirdest man on planet Earth.
Rudy did give an interview on Fox this morning, which I have yet to see any of, but I'm sure it is going to be worthwhile viewing.
I saw on Twitter.
Where was the interview held?
I was actually from a studio. It was very tame for him. But he also claimed that he was being censored as he was doing an interview on Sunday, which is the most watched news day for most Americans, on America's most popular news network. And he's claiming that he's being censored. It's like, you literally cannot be censored less than this right now.
Okay, that's an interesting point, and I wasn't sure how to like kind of bring it all in, but there's this narrative, whatever, that's getting floated around from Republicans, that there's a bias against them, and that all these people that tried to invalidate Donald Trump's election 4 years ago are now screaming that this, like, it's this whole like, well, you did this, now we get to do this, and it's like this bullshit tit for tat whining that I just like, I don't understand. Like, what I don't know if you guys, I don't expect you guys to be like, oh yeah, no, they're absolutely right, but like, what do you think is the credibility of, well, they spent 4 years trying to overturn Trump's election? Like, yes, he was impeached, but that wasn't about the election, like, it just seems like such a disingenuous narrative. But I don't know, does it have traction? I guess it has traction amongst the Republican followers.
Yeah, it has a lot of traction, actually. Sorry, go on, Bark.
No, you're correct. I agree with you, Coleman. I think but that's all that matters, that it has traction with these people. This significant, actually giant amount of people who are willing to vote for Donald Trump, right? So anything to keep spinning that ball to be bigger, more confusing. Like, the confusion is the notable thing here. Just continue to talk about nonsensical things and make accusations that are based on nothing, and then just make it as nebulous as possible for as many people to kind of get lost in as possible. And look, it's 70 million people, right? So keep obfuscating reality and you win. And that's kind of, even if you lose, in his mind, if he continues to just do this, he's going to come out ahead. I mean, it'll be really fun to watch the downturn of all this. He was at he rode that to an apex, and which we can argue about when that apex was, probably pre-COVID. It was probably literally around when he was impeached, when he was at his highest popularity, and he was riding that wave of obfuscating facts. And then it's just been a slow decline, and he's about to, perhaps die soon. I don't know, but it'll be a slow decline until then, at least to us, at least to sensible people watching. Who knows if he'll ever really attain the feeling that he is the loser that he is. I have no clue. Probably not. He could probably take that feeling all the way to his dying day. But yeah, it's clear that he's going to continue to try to obfuscate the
Mhm.
reality. So
But it's not even just him. Like it's other Republicans. It's Mitch McConnell. It's the Lindsey Grahams. It's those kind of guys that are saying like, oh well, he has the right to this process. He has the right to seek legal recourse on these matters. That's like, and it's just like obviously it's their way of like not making a stand against him while also not making a stand for him. But then they'll throw in these, yeah, well, and the Democrats tried to overturn the election since the day that he got elected. So why doesn't Trump have the right to uh, follow his own legal recourse? Totally ignoring the fact that Hillary Clinton conceded the election and orderly transfer of power happened within weeks of the election being certified. I don't know, Scott. Do you got anything to add on this? I'm
I
at
think
the word.
certainly like drawing false equivalencies and obfuscating has just become a big part of the Republican brand, which is not to say the Democrats are immune to this, but for them to say, well, they were trying to overturn the 2016 election with all their Russia, Russia, Russia. I mean, it's so obviously wrong to thinking people, and obviously they weren't trying to overturn the election because Barack Obama wrote Trump a nice note and Hillary conceded. At no point did they try and run to court to say this is all invalid, despite the fact that there really was a load of evidence of sketchy stuff going on between the Trump campaign and the Russians. I think you need to look no further than the fact that every time they asked one of these people about it, they all lied, which tells you there's something going on there, that everybody lied about everything to do with Russia. There's obviously something going on there. Um, but then for now the Republicans to basically just say, well, they had their thing to complain about and we had our thing to complain about. So, it's all the same. It's just political games. Um, I think really speaks to how they've just moved into like a post-truth reality free world where claims like, but there's a fundamental difference here in that the Russians really did interfere with the election. And, the only election fraud in Pennsylvania is some guy trying to vote for his dead mother for Trump. Like these are not equivalent, but none of that sort of like logical consistency, it just doesn't matter anymore. I don't think largely in American politics, and it's really cemented by the Supreme Court confirmation and kind of the way they bent over backwards to try and claim that this was not the exact same situation that they, said was inappropriate 4 years ago. They just abandon all pretense of there are rules other than what you can get away with and what enhances your power. And truly this shows they will just say anything, I think, do anything, um if it appeals to the rubes, and it does.
it does.
Well, it's probably a whole nother podcast we could do, but this idea that the media was so against Trump and it was biased against Trump and all of this stuff, and that there's a liberal bias in media, despite the fact that, like Coleman pointed out, the largest, most watched news network in America is Fox News. And people say the same thing in Canada, the liberal bias in the media and stuff, when most of the newspapers are owned by corporations that have a pretty conservative bent. They're conservative donors and all this, like this. I just don't see the actual evidence of it, but I guess it's enough that it's perceived, that it's there. And I struggle with this all the time to be like, okay, well, is there a liberal bias, or is it just that most people disagree with some of these ideals that conservative people uh, espouse, and especially a guy like Trump. Like, of course, all the front pages are going to be, "Get this fucking idiot out of here," when he's doing dumb shit and clearly, benefiting from the presidency financially and, like, doing all of these other things, but then they try and, like, wash all that stuff away and say, "Oh, yeah, but they don't talk about the other stuff," or it's all negative Trump stuff, and it's but so there seems to be this large section of people that just you have to explain away a lot, I guess is what I'm saying, if you wanted to, like, actually have this clear debate. So it doesn't surprise me that the newspapers are filled with this shit. But it's like for the Trump voter who is like, "Well, yeah, but no one's talking about the good stuff he did, or no one's talking about this other thing." But it's like to get to that point, you have to go through, "Okay, yeah, well, he, did this thing that was illegal. Okay, yeah, I know I don't like that, but well, what about this comment that he made about women or whatever? Yeah, yeah, I know I don't like that, but and you gotta go through so much shit that you kind of excuse away to get to maybe a couple nuggets of things that he did that, like, benefited the stock market or taxpayers or something like this.
I
I don't
feel
know.
like, just I'd seen there's some stat that it's like 93% of the coverage of Trump was negative or something like that. And I imagine Ted Bundy could really make similar claims to say,
Yeah.
everyone just only writes about the bad stuff. It's like, well, if it's 93% bad stuff and no one wants to write how, Ted Bundy once stopped to help some ducklings across the road or something, and no one's covering that. It's like, yeah, but there's all the dead chicks also, and so we kind of have to we need to cover that as well. To say there's a bias, I think this ridiculous idea has kind of infected the world of journalism, particularly in the United States, that their job is to be somehow politically neutral. And
Mhm.
that's not it. Your job is to simply be objective, I think, and simply state the facts as they are.
Mhm.
And if one side is just running roughshod over the Constitution, constantly breaking the law, all of these things, you don't have to draw some equivalency or then say we spent half the article talking about the overwhelming number of bad things that they've done, so now in the sake of neutrality or fairness we're now going to devote the other half of the article to how they didn't start a nuclear war or something. I think this idea that there's a bias against Trump because the coverage is negative just seems like such a childish way of it's similar, I guess. Maybe I would analogize to it as an Oilers fan for the last 10 years. Most of the
Here we
coverage
go.
that I for the Oilers is really negative, but at least the coverage that I read, I would suggest, and there is certainly a segment of the fan base saying these people are so biased and they're always negative about everything, but the team is always losing. So if you're constantly writing negative things about a team that's constantly losing, is it just bias or are you just fairly covering the fact that they suck? I think the media has just been fairly covering the fact that Trump sucks. Not all of them. Obviously, some people are a bit crazy and um, exaggerate claims of his awfulness, which I think is just strategically stupid because the awfulness is so apparent and brazen that you don't need to exaggerate one bit to have a hard-hitting story. But they've just, you know, it's hard if you're just calling balls and strikes and it's just nothing but strikes, then it's hard to say it's unfair because there's no balls being called.
Right. And I guess that's the point. And then to me, this is, we can move this actually to Canada and then we can come back to talk about what we think of how the Biden administration is going to look and some questions there. But this leads right in because I think that this is exactly, this isn't a unique problem to the US. There is the same sort of thing, conversations happening in Canada where oh, there's a conservative bias in the media or something like that against the conservatives in the media. People don't want to talk about whatever it is. And I see similar rhetoric going on now in the Canadian political environment that mirrors a lot of the shit that happened in the U.S. over the last 8 to 12 years. Um, that brought them to this point. And I don't like our system of elections is different and stuff like this, but I wonder that the fact that so many people still voted for Trump, that sends a message to conservative politicians that in Canada that are inclined to use similar tactics that hey, no, this is still a mess. This is still a playbook that can work.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of not just in Canada but all over the world. There's going to be a lot of conservative politicians that try and recreate the Trump magic, I guess you can call it. And I think they're going to, in that specific way, they're going to fail miserably because Trump is a terrible human being and an idiot. But he does have an ability to talk to that base.
Yeah.
And the way he talks is it's relatable to them. They understand it. I think like if a guy if not to say he's going to, but if Aaron O'Toole decided to jump out tomorrow and start talking the way that Trump does, he would just be ripped to shreds. He just doesn't have that I don't know.
Charisma.
Yeah,
Wig.
in air, yeah, the wig in the air quotes. But yeah, you see in Alberta especially, you get Jason Kenney will come out and say that there's not enough conservative sources like covering his government, not enough conservative opinions. But then he does a press conference, and one of the first two people ask a question is Rick Bell from The Sun, like kind of the mouthpiece of the conservative newspaper media in Canada. So it's just they've kind of realized that that's a good fallback to go on, is like blame the media for not liking us enough, bias. But in the States, you can look at Fox News was built to be the mouthpiece of the Republican Party. And now the Republican Party itself is turning on Fox News for not being far enough right. That really tells you something.
Or
like
even just for not being on board with all the shit that Trump did.
Yeah, like if you're moving past the network that you built specifically to spread misinformation for you, then you might have a problem. Like that might be on you. Like you can't just keep creating these new networks to do that.
Well, the thing that frustrates me in Canada that is, yeah, there's this blame the media thing going on and sort of a scapegoating thing going on, in Alberta especially, blame Trudeau, all of this stuff. And then the myth that I'm seeing, and I mean, you guys can maybe correct me on this because you're there, so you might see it more, but you see all these claims of Trudeau is the most divisive prime minister we've ever had. He's dividing the nation, all of this stuff. But yet I only see that coming from one side of the spectrum. And they're talking about, Leslie Lewis just wrote a piece in the National Post, talking about there's no good debate, there's no honest debate happening anymore. But yet the people in that sphere are the ones that are saying Trudeau hates Alberta and is destroying the province, and like putting this sort of malice and this intent on it that doesn't make any sense. Like as dumb as Trudeau is, and we can discuss the policies and the failures and all that stuff, fine, but to whip up the base by saying he's out to destroy one of the biggest moneymakers for the country it makes no sense. No one's dumb enough to shoot a hole in their own boat. Like it's just, that's not it. Are they pursuing climate friendly policies that are perhaps negative to the oil industry or make it more difficult? Yes, sure, but there's a lot of data out there. If you want to talk about honest debate and using facts and all this stuff, there's a lot of data out there that says that's the way that we need to go, and the majority of Canadians also feel that that's the way you need to go. When polled about climate, it's a big issue for them. So this idea, like, it drives me nuts to say that, like, it's the same thing. Oh, there's this bias, there's this, there's that. He's this worse thing. And it makes me think of how Republicans treated Obama. He's divisive just because who he is. It's not about the policies. It's not about the, anything. It's just who that guy is. And Trudeau's the same thing. He was never going to be loved in the West because of his dad, of course. But, there's plenty of evidence that he doesn't hate Alberta. I've never seen a press conference or an opinion piece written or, by prominent liberal folks, liberal party people that say, you know what, Alberta's the fucking devil and we gotta get them and we gotta destroy them, and but that's the rhetoric you hear from the other side. And it actually leads to bad things. The guy that stormed the Rideau Hall with a bunch of guns, like, what is going on here? I just see a really bad trend, and I don't know, you guys can push back on me. Maybe I'm exaggerating. Maybe there is a bunch of liberal things going on in Canada that talk about how shitty Alberta is, but
I'm just gonna pull that clip of you calling Alberta the devil and share it everywhere.
Yeah, I don't know. I it's a bit of a leap to me anyway to go from the kind of reality or alternate reality that these people in the United States live in to Canada. I'm not sure if I'm ready to kind of conflate those two as being the same,
I'm not
uh,
saying it's the same. I'm saying it's
or
starting
it's
in
leaking
Canada. And
in, or if it's starting. Yeah, okay. Um, yeah, I don't know. Like for me, in when we look at news coverage in the United States, and I'll go back to what Scott said a few minutes ago. I think the problem, or one of the issues that we see, is that it's new to, uh, like you said, Brad, that your job is to kind of call it as you see it and have good faith arguments. Well, this idea that one side is not going to act in good faith in their way they argument. I think that's a new phenomena, and I think it has caused the other side, and in that case, the left, or the radical left, as Trump likes to call it.
Antifa.
Yeah, I think it has caused them to kind of counterbalance in a similar fashion, where they are arguing in bad faith as well. Certain segments, you can't brand everybody in the same manner,
Mhm.
and so, but it's almost a natural thing for that counterbalance to take shape. And as far as Canada goes, like, uh, yeah, you can. I haven't read the same Leslyn Lewis article, so I don't know enough about it to comment on it. But um, you could say that this this kind of, when we talk about things like climate change, and that the overwhelmingly people support kind of policy to curb climate change. I think that's natural, but that doesn't mean that everybody knows kind of, not everyone's an expert on how that's accomplished, right? So
Mhm.
trying to trying to drive the wedge is I feel going to happen, and I think it works to a certain extent with, because of kind of the liberal, uh, I guess you could say, establishment in this country. But I don't think it goes to the same kind of reality bending as what we see in the United States. And I think what we see in the United States is a reaction to a whole new phenomena, right? And people, news networks, not knowing really how to deal with it necessarily, right? Trying to put themselves in the middle, like you said, Coleman, when that is just, you know, it's not the correct thing to do, but they're used to having good faith arguments, and that's just not happening anymore. So,
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I don't know. I'm torn. Maybe I get a little too fired up about it, but I really like. I just, when you see guys like Jason Kenney calling people who disagree with him socialists or environmental extremists and stuff like this, and then he's the first one to retweet this article saying, you know the art of debate is gone in Canada, in Canadian society, and it's, when did we get so afraid of the truth that we can't hide we're worried about our feelings getting hurt or something like this. And everything he does is an assault on the truth. I could give you a list of all the things. It drives me nuts because I don't see that from the other side, at least the politicians in the media. Like, I understand that there's this, and I feel like the conservative folks in the US and in Canada have latched on to this, the woke people, the super progressives, as the boogeyman, right? Like Antifa and shit like this. And in the States, again, this is sort of, they're way further down the road, where there is groups that attack other, conservative protests and stuff. There is that violence. In Canada, a statue got pulled down, and I can agree with a lot of the conservative points that really woke progressive shit is, illogical. It's not helpful. It actually is divisive. Like, it doesn't make sense when you get to that extreme of the left, spectrum. And I mean, I'm not going to go into all of what it is. I think people kind of know what we're talking about when we say that woke shit. But it's like making it this bigger thing than it is. It's like, we can talk about that, and I think that we should talk about that, and we should understand that these ideas that some of these more radical activists, or whatever it is, professors in universities, that kind of, they're sure we can talk about how we should engage those ideas and think about them critically and be able to say, I don't want to defund the police or abolish the police or have statues pulled down and not be called a racist. There is that name throwing on the other side, but again, it's like this false equivalency. I see a small group of people not stirring, large sections of the population to like separatist sentiment, you know, with their wokeness and stuff like this. But then the other side is like anything left of center gets tarred with this whole super progressive woke shit. It's the same thing that they tried to do to Biden, right? Like Biden is not a super left guy. He's very center, So,
Yeah,
but
but
they were,
look at the problem that the Democrats faced is that they lost House seats, they lost, or they couldn't flip the Senate. So, obviously, a lot of America, a large segment of America, um, kind of is shying away from that, and I don't think the Congress and um, I don't think the Congress people on the Democratic side did a good enough job uh, backing away from that type of rhetoric. I think they kind of embraced that rhetoric for a very long time, and
Mhm.
that obviously was problematic for them, as evidenced by their
But in
uh,
Canada, have they
conference
embraced
call.
it that much? I
Yeah,
know
no,
True.
but it's like when he's, I guess, in Canada, like Kenny is on the margins, really. And when it comes to power players in Canada, he's a guy polling the worst of any premier in the um, fourth largest province. Okay, so he's a mid-level kind of premier of a province that doesn't like him, right? And Leslyn Lewis is a total fringe actor. Uh, whatever, number two for a party that uh, is, right now the opposition. So yeah, she like bringing attention to this is good, but I don't see that as like a movement, right?
I wonder. I
I see
wonder if
the
the next.
conservatives.
Sorry, I was just gonna say. I wonder if the next Alberta provincial election might be a little bit of a referendum on this stuff, because I think you're right. Jason Kenney has been, I would say, very Trumpy thus far. The UCP government, in terms of, yeah, anyone who's opposed to us is a socialist or a radical environmentalist. They have like an army of well-paid Twitter trolls that just go to try and demonize anyone who disagrees in the slightest.
Doesn't
They
really smack of honest,
no, they just
free speech
lie.
debate, does
Yeah,
it? Yeah.
they just lie constantly with no second thoughts. Um, and this is what worries me, because I think, in Canada, we seem to just sort of import a lot of our kind of political style and conversations from the United States. Like, where there was kind of the Conservative Party of Canada was putting out memes about, say defending statues and stuff, and then nobody was even talking about it at the time in Canada. But because it was sort of a hot button issue in the United States, it gets imported here. And so I think, like Steve, you're right that we're not nearly as far down this road of sort of fact-free insanity that the United States has found itself in. But in terms of that spectrum, I think we're trending the wrong way, and we are very much trending the way that things are trending down there. I see the level of dishonesty, and it's absolutely not entirely conservative parties. I've started to see it. I follow both the UCP and the NDP on Twitter here in Alberta, and the NDP, our left-wing party, has also put out, had some stuff that just strikes me as dishonest, not really an honest reading or explanation of the facts. um, and that's, I think it's a fundamental problem, and I don't know how you fix it, because it seems lying works. And so if you're the side that's losing because you're not lying, then it seems that politically the move would be, okay, well, they're going to use sort of dishonest memes. I guess dishonest memes are what works in 2020. So now we're going to start with that. And where's the honesty left? Like, where do you go if you just want straight talk, or, an honest assessment of the world and the problems we face? It seems increasingly difficult to get when our politics is conducted via memes.
That's why you come to this podcast, right, Coleman?
The
Well,
hard-hitting truth.
Yeah,
it's actually why I'm leaving this podcast.
that's
All
just
right.
like Barg.
Not
Barg
enough
to
memes.
step on me with an announcement just when it's my turn to talk. I'm outraged. Outraged.
All right, Bark. Well, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I gotta go. The leaders are rounding Amen Corner at the Masters. You gotta watch it. Ooh,
All
it's
right,
gonna be a good
enjoy.
one.
Thanks for
All
being
right.
here.
No worries. See you guys.
Yeah, okay, Coleman. What do you? I don't know. We left you sitting there for a while. Do you have anything to weigh in on here?
Oh, don't worry. I switched from coffee to beer, so I had time to go and freshen my glass. I always enjoy listening to Scott talk, and I always enjoy watching Barg leave. So I'm happy with this
Heyo.
podcast so far. No, I think Alberta's and Canada in general, we're a little less susceptible to the slide you see in the States because like our elections haven't become as much of a business yet.
Mm-hmm.
Where you kind of look at the States, like as soon as if this election is ever done being or finalized, they go right into 2024. Like who's the candidate's going to be? Trump's already talking about 2024, and he's not even out of office yet. Where Canada,
Well, and they
it's
have
like,
their midterms, and then the
yeah.
primary process starts a year before the election. Yeah.
And in our elections, like we fire them up, we make the date, and then what is it? A month and a half, 2 months?
Well,
We done?
yeah,
5 weeks.
Trudeau.
5
Yeah,
weeks?
Trudeau limited it to 50 days. He overturned an elections bill that Pierre Poilievre and Harper put in, which oddly enough resembled a lot of the tactics of voter suppression that that Republicans use in
Mhm.
terms of voter ID laws, allowing more money into politics and stuff like that. Yeah, so 50 days I think is what the Liberals erased that bill basically and limited it to 50 days.
Oh, that's a perfectly reasonable amount of time. Like you don't like these politicians that we have in Canada. Like, we don't need more than 50 days to figure out what they're about.
Yeah.
Like you need 50 days to figure out what Jason Wolf's or Jason Kenney's about. You just read Matt Wolf's Twitter feed. His
Yeah.
$100,000 issue manager. This is one of these guys that tweets memes and stuff like that. I'd
Yeah.
argue if we're paying him by the pound, we might be getting a pretty good deal. But
Oh, hey-o.
as far as like his content, like he's terrible. He's a real piece of shit. That guy. Yeah. So like we haven't made our politics a business yet. Most Canadians don't pay attention to politics until election time, and even then, most of them don't even pay attention and actually vote. So as long as like there's definitely an argument for keeping. Like you want people engaged in the political process, but not too engaged to where it becomes their life, like in the States. And then you get that hardcore polarization and stuff like that. I think a lot of
Mhm.
Canadian voters to this point still kind of approach elections with an open mind. A lot of them kind of get locked in and vote for one party no matter what, but they're not they're they're not crazy about it. They're not. In Alberta, you see a little bit of it with the Facebook memes and stuff like that, and like these people that are crazy and saying Trudeau should be locked up and he's embarrassing us in an international stage, which isn't true. People internationally love Trudeau. They love
He's
him more
he's
than we
beloved.
do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's more loved outside of, as someone that lives outside of Canada. He is more
Yeah.
loved outside of Canada than within.
Well, I remember when I was in Nashville right after he got elected, right after Trump got elected, and I was talking to. It was at a music festival, Bonnaroo. It was not the one that we went to, Brad. It was the next time, and a music festival. A bunch of more liberal-minded Americans, when they find out I was Canadian, were telling me how great Trudeau was and this, and I'm like, whoa, guys, like you're projecting a lot of your Trump feelings onto Canada. It's like
Yeah.
at that point, even like Trudeau is fine. He's fine. Like let's not lose our minds about this.
Yeah.
But it's definitely worrisome. Like,
So this is, I'll jump in here. This is where it worries me. And again, I feel like there's this like, I don't know. I don't want to come across as like, so anti, Kenny or conservative or such a homer for the left or something. Obviously, politically, I lean left. But with the rhetoric that I see, and the sort of, let's say there's mistruths or misrepresentation of stuff by both sides of it. There's a certain level of rhetoric that I only see from the one side. Like I was saying, this divisiveness, this idea that, there's demonizing the other side as irredeemable or out to get you, or somehow insidious in what they're trying to do. And that really upsets me, because that's where you get violence. I feel like that's where you get violence. The guy, like I mentioned, the guy that stormed Rideau Hall with a bunch of guns wasn't doing it because somebody misgendered him. you know he's doing it because he got the idea in his head that Trudeau is a traitor and someone should kill him, and all of these things that you see online. I follow a lot of the people that their work is to expose this stuff. They try and get into these Facebook groups and stuff to show what kind of stuff is what people are saying. And whether it's intentional or not, the rhetoric that influential people in the conservative movement use has consequences. I mean, we're seeing the separatist party in Alberta. Like, there is no woke separatist party yet. I'm not saying it can't happen, and I'm not saying that there isn't language and rhetoric on that side that is dumb. Like I said, calling people racist because they don't want statues turned, like that exists too. But I don't see it at the level and in the sort of influential pulpits that I see on the other side. And we haven't seen any in Canada, as far as I know, actionable violence or anything like that because of that rhetoric.
Yeah, it's hard. You want to, again, so you want to maintain objectivity. Um, but you're right. I think there isn't a similar push to say the reason Aaron O'Toole wants to lower marginal tax rates is because he hates you and doesn't want you to succeed, or he
Yeah.
hates this country, or hates your part of this country. Um, I think certainly Alberta, there's been a lot of the, you know, the NDP just hates business and hates success and hates you basically, and
Yeah.
that's
There's
why.
socialists.
Yeah,
There's like
that's
that thing
why.
too.
But they didn't introduce this carbon tax to hopefully improve our environmental standing with potential investors around the world. No, they did it because they hate you and they don't want your kids to have good jobs. Um, and you're right, I don't see that nearly to the same extent. That sort of, obviously you go to like far left crazy world, you probably find those memes and whatnot, but they don't get a wink and a nod from the actual mainstream
Right.
conventional
Exactly.
politicians in the way that they absolutely do. Um, Certainly here in Alberta, and I think the Conservative Party more nationally is, they're not necessarily going to put out those memes themselves, but when they come out, they're certainly not going to disavow it or say, that's not the tone we should strike. It's kind of, well, they have a good point if you think maybe Trudeau really does hate Alberta.
Yeah. I'm
Um,
just saying. I'm just asking the question. I'm
just
just saying.
asking questions.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the phrase actually you say that the phrase "just saying" has damaged social media more than any other. I'm pretty sure. Is when someone comes out and says "just saying,"
Yeah.
it's like I'm not going to take any responsibility for what I'm posting right now, but I'm still putting it out there. I don't know, I
Well,
went into Facebook for the other to interrupt you guys. I went into Facebook the other day for the first time in a very long time, and open it up, and the first thing that shows up in my feed is a friend from high school sharing a meme of it just says "lock him up" at the top, and it's a Photoshop of Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh sharing a prison cell. And I'm like, first of all, okay, maybe you think like Justin Trudeau's in power and he's committed these crimes that are worthy of being locked up. But what did Jagmeet do? He's the
yeah.
third party. Like,
Yeah. Guy has no power whatsoever.
yeah, like he propped up the liberal government, I guess, but then like no one wanted an election. Like that was the whole thing. No one wanted an election. So he did everyone a favor. But yeah, apparently they're locking Jagmeet up. And not only that, they're locking the conspirators up in the same prison cell, which seems odd to me.
Yeah. You wouldn't want them to continue conspiring
Yeah, there's no
or
telling what
anything
they
like
could
that.
accomplish.
Yeah.
That would sort of imply a level of thinking to these meme making folks that I think is perhaps, two notches too high.
It
It's
might be.
Yeah, it's disconcerting. I mean, I saw something on Facebook where it was again some similar meme about we got to get Justin Trudeau out of here. Yeah, he's the worst thing that could happen. And just looking at the comments, because I'm a sucker for punishment, so I always I always look through these things. And the two people were lamenting the fact that he's not going to get voted out. And someone came in and said, well, the only way we can get him out is if we actually start clamping down on election fraud. And it just shows you how much the American shit like permeates into the psyche of the people to the north, because it's like, what, like,
That's
there
some
is
very
no conversation about election fraud in Canada.
some
Well,
dangerous, scary talk there from my perspective, because my thought, at least, the one thing that sort of I can say definitively Canadian democracy is unequivocally better on this front is that to date, we haven't really had a party that is just systematically trying to disenfranchise the other side's supporters. Like, nobody is out there, the Liberal Party is not out there running on a platform of shutting down polling places in rural Alberta. And the Conservatives aren't trying to, pass strenuous voter ID laws in
What they
downtown
did,
Toronto.
Harper did.
All right, maybe I could be wrong.
Yeah.
yeah,
But
your
it doesn't it
entire
doesn't
point is invalidated. Go
I
ahead.
guess so, but there is down south an entire industry dedicated to, as opposed to winning votes, just preventing votes from the other side. And we don't have
Yeah.
anything to that industrial scale here in
No.
Canada. And I really hope that doesn't change, because starting to go down that road, the second you um, get in people's minds that there is widespread fraud, you just shake
Sorry.
people's
Yeah.
yeah. Once you start shaking people's faith in the system, I can't see how it ever comes back in our lifetime. So that's why I think what's going on down south right now is so destructive, because I think this will likely become a feature of virtually every election they have. I mean, there was some guy who lost 75-25 and still refused to concede and said that
Oh
he
yeah.
lost entirely due to fraud, and this will just be the playbook going forward. That
Wait, that guy was great because he's from California. He lost 75-25, and he says, "I'm not only did he not concede, he's like, I'm going down to City Hall to find out what happened." It's like, you gonna count like 200? It was like 200,000 ballots. You gonna go count 200,000 ballots and
Yeah.
look at them all?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I don't mean to, you know, say that it's on the level of the US. I don't think we are. It's the same in Germany, it's the same in the Western democracies are all facing these similar challenges. I mean, the Harper law that the elections, Pierre Polivet introduced it into the Commons. I think it was in their last term, and it did. It invalidated a bunch of forms of ID that voters could use. It got rid of the vouching system, so you couldn't vouch for voters. And these things are known to affect minority communities, disenfranchised communities, and I don't know if I'm assuming that those people tend to vote Liberal or NDP. Um, it had a bunch of other things. This was when they got caught with the robocalls scandal as well. So they were doing that too. And they just tried to like they made a bunch of things illegal, but then took away all the power of the elections commissions to actually do anything about it. So it was a really kind of like weird bill that I don't know. I guess we don't remember it. I was looking it up the other day, um, and it was overturned. It was one of the first things Trudeau did when he came in. So I mean, this stuff does creep in. That's the point. We're not at that level, but I think we need to be vigilant. And when I've talked to people in Canada about this, they're just like, it's not that big a deal. Um, we're not that extreme or something like this. And then but Trudeau's the worst thing that's ever happened to this, and he's dividing the country and yada, yada, yada. And I'm just like, I just don't see how he's doing that. I don't see the evidence for that. So I guess we could all agree that we need to focus more on policy, but whether that happens, I don't know.
Well, it's funny. Speaking of Harper, I saw an interview with him, kind of tied to the media thing. An interview. I don't think it was this year. I think it was done in the last couple of years, where it was kind of like on a stage doing a Q&A thing, and he was talking about why he lost his last election that he ran
Right.
for, and he blamed not enough right-wing media sources specifically.
Yeah.
Not that he not those policies, not the fact that in the re-election campaign they set up a hotline for people to report barbaric practices that they saw
yeah.
in their neighborhood. Nothing like that. It was like specifically that reason. It's like I didn't run a bad campaign and I didn't bring in divisive policies when I was in power.
Yeah.
It was the media that did it.
Yeah.
And talking to voter fraud, voter fraud's hilarious because like to commit voter fraud on a high level would be so labor intensive, especially in Canada.
Yeah, it seems
Like
there would just be greater returns to just, get out the vote efforts. I'm trying the
Yeah.
yeah,
amount of effort you would have to go to like fraudulently cast one ballot that is surely not going to actually tip the scales to get thousands and thousands of fraudulent ballots. I think in part maybe belies a lack of both civics education and critical thought on the part of these people alleging this, that like how would you plan to do it, how you might, they have it's a quite a complicated system. They have big lists of who's allowed to vote, and a lot of thought and work goes into this. It's really, really hard to commit sort of voter fraud on any scale, much less the sort of scale you would need to actually change outcomes.
yeah, it's like when you voting in a Canadian election, like unless you're voting in advance, which people can do and do often, I never do, but like you can only vote at one box. Like when I go to vote, I have to go to one spot and I get in line and they send me to one specific box in a gymnasium at an elementary school. Like that's the only way I can vote. So like
Usually
to steal my vote is you have to like you have to pay a guy to go to that specific box, and that's just to steal my one vote. See how many people you like if you want to steal like 2,000 votes, like you need at least 2,000 people to do it on a day. It's like that's not like, it's not going to come
And
out.
then later when you steal the guy's vote and then he shows up to vote and his name's already crossed off, there's going to be some questions, there's an investigation, like there's just no way to, I mean, I could be wrong. There could be massive, subterranean fraud rings going on right now,
Laughing at us right now.
laughing at us thinking,
Mhm.
"Oh, it's so simple." But I don't think so. And going
Well,
down
all
that
of the
road.
investigations and studies by academics and security experts into elections, both in Canada and the US, they turn up minimal. Mm, Like, doesn't even come close to affecting the outcome at all
Well,
of voter
it
fraud.
seems like the little pencil and paper system we have is like the best possible safeguard against that. It's like any argument to go all digital with voting. I'm like, no, fuck that. Let's just stay on paper. This like you get that little pencil you get at the golf course, and then you mark down your X, and that's it. It's pretty hard to mess that up.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, I guess we'll move on from this. We kind of devolved and went further into that than I expected us to, but that's probably my fault because I get pretty riled up about that, and I do worry about Canada and Germany and the rest of the places. The UK is another one. I think we got to remain vigilant. And I don't know if you guys have seen this, but there's a group that formed in Alberta. It's called Next 30, I think, and they had an opinion article published. I can't remember in what paper, but it's basically an organization that's I don't understand it all yet. It's something that I think we should cover in an upcoming episode. But their whole thing is we got to get away from this polarization. We got to get together and find workable solutions for things and talk about policy rather than all of this other bullshit. So we'll see if that's something that can be a force for good in all of this and get us away from all of these things that we just talked about. But for the last topic of the show, let's go back to the US and look at a Biden administration. We all believe that that's what's going to happen. And what he's going to be able to do, a lot hinges on the Senate. But he's already signaled things about getting back into the WHO. His foreign policy is going to be welcomed around the world much more than Trump's was. But he has, we were talking about the really woke progressiveness angle of the or side of the spectrum. He's got internal divisions in the party that he's going to deal with. AOC, the congresswoman, she came out pretty quickly after Biden was declared the winner with a critique, basically saying it wasn't the woke policies, it wasn't the progressivism that scared people away in the Congress races because they lost seats. It was a lack of understanding of the electorate and digital campaigning and all these things. So there's some divisions there. So it's going to be a rough road, I think, for Biden. But the one thing we haven't talked about too is the coronavirus, which I feel like he could instantly do a better job there, and maybe get some goodwill amongst the Americans if he can turn things around there. But you're seeing all of the rhetoric. Oh, he's going to come and lock everything down. He's going to do this, that. A lot of challenges is my point to this rambling change of topic. Who wants to jump in with the challenges that Biden's going to face?
I think the coronavirus one specifically is like the numbers they're getting down there are crazy this last
It's
week.
insane.
It's like the North Dakota, 1 in 90 people in North Dakota tested positive this week. And in South Dakota, it was like 1 in 98. Like, that's absurd.
Yeah.
Like, it's just a crazy amount. And this is coming from someone that got tested yesterday because it might have been exposed. It's crazy. These people are idiots out there. I think it's kind of interesting because I think the idea was that the Democrats are going to steal a big chunk of Republican votes in this last election, and they didn't. They took a lot of the undecideds, which I think are normally undecided, but I think we kind of proved this interesting. Is like there's a lot of Republican voters that are just going to vote Republican no matter who's in charge. So, like, I think the Biden administration is going to have to cater to the AOC side, the far left, which is kind of crazy because like there's nothing that AOC wants that would be considered outrageous in Canada. It's like stuff we already have for the most part.
Yeah.
But down there, it's like she's this pariah, and I'm like she might not even be in the NDP in Canada. Like, it's crazy. So I think they're gonna have to cater to that side a bit, but that's just American politics. When you only have two parties, like you're gonna have to cater to one side or the other of like whatever party you're in. You say a lot of it depends on the Senate. If they can get the Senate through and control that, he has a lot more options. But Democrats always find a way to not be as successful as they should be. It seems like even in the Obama administration, it was a lot of just treading water, which for the states would be great right now. Just normalize everything. But they seem to always get in their own way, and they always want to like cater to the far right and like bring them back into the fold. And I'm like, they might be gone. Like you kind of just need to forget them right now and just focus on like getting your platform across for this time that you might have.
But is it though part of the challenge because is that their platform is so divided amongst their own party? Like they're the party that represents the broadest group of Americans, we'll say, and cobbling together that coalition is difficult. You got Clinton and Biden, I imagine, is going to be the same. This sort of center, much like Obama was. They have trade, free trade interests and stuff they have to deal with, and then you have Bernie Sanders and his coalition of people in there as well, being like, well, no, these free trade agreements hurt workers, and it's a. I wonder if that's why we're like, well, they always find a way to lose, but it's because there's so many people in that tent that you can't please them all. Scott?
Yeah, I guess if you're strictly the rural white people party, it's easier to just, placate the desires of this sort of monolith of rural white people. I think everything really comes down to what happens in January in Georgia, which is why I think when AOC immediately came out after and said, yeah, we need to kind of change our messaging, and part was very much, no, it's not that we went too progressive and scared people off. It's that we weren't progressive enough. And throughout this cycle, I've been following a bunch of like the Lincoln Project in the States of the sort of former Republicans who have been working against Trump. And forget policies. Republicans have been objectively infinitely better at winning elections despite being unpopular. They're just better tactically. And, the one guy likes to constantly say sort of that the Democrats are holistically bad at politics. And this would be a perfect example that basically Biden's ability to get almost anything done hinges on special elections in Georgia, of all places. I think if you're AOC, you would be wise to shut the hell up, find a cabin until January 6th, and don't show your face. Um, Simply because to come out and say the Democratic Party needs to be way more progressive is not going to be a winning message in Georgia right now. So you need to think about politically what's going to win. And I think, certainly the Republicans in Georgia would love nothing more than to have AOC's face plastered on everything and remind people that your opponents are crazy socialists. So, yeah, a lot of it comes down to Georgia. I think they might win one. I think their Democrats are very hard pressed. They likely won't control the Senate, which means, unfortunately, I think nothing major really gets done on climate change or on voting rights, which is my sort of playbook for the Democrats as to what they should have done had they won the Senate, is just pass a lot of sweeping voter rights legislation, at least under my previous assumption that improving turnout would increase their electoral chances. But we had massive, turnout, and that didn't prove to be the case. So I might have to kind of change my priors there. But I think in terms of what the Biden administration can do, it's largely, I think, a return to sanity is just like being undervalued at this point. Just having kind of grown-ups in charge, not just the president not tweeting crazy stuff, but as Coleman referenced, there's all sorts of important government positions that have been left unfilled. Their cabinet secretaries are just hacks and industry lobbyists and people with no experience um, running much of anything, that have really no business holding high level government office. So I think just a return to competence and grown-ups will really help. um, in terms of foreign policy, trying to rebuild alliances, maybe a bit less coddling of the dictators. I'd be curious to see how the American relationship with Russia evolves as they do a complete 180 on the kind of American position with regards to Russia with a new administration, a new president coming in. But certainly trying to rebuild alliances. And I'm sure the leaders of NATO and the EU could not be happier that the orange buffoon is finally gone. I think on COVID, it's hard to say because I had this thought the other day that I think the one man in the United States who's actually positioned to make a giant difference on COVID is Donald Trump, which is unfortunate because he's never going to do it. Because when Joe Biden comes out and says, "Hey, Trump supporters, wear a mask and stay home and quit licking each other," they're gonna say, "No, big government telling me what to do." Like, the one man they're gonna listen to on this front is Donald Trump. And if he had just
Yeah,
come out from day one and sold MAGA masks for $50 each and said,
yeah,
"Your great patriotic duty to Trump is to, like, stay home," they would do it because they don't have, much in the way of strict principles. They're just going along with this guy. So it'll be tough. But on the other hand, like, I saw North Dakota with their, 1 in 90 got infected last week or something. Their governor today or yesterday just, passed a mask mandate. Their Republican governor. And I think having
one.
Trump gone will allow a lot of Republican leaning states more leeway because
Mm,
they're not going to get that, presidential Twitter throwdown of like, "What are you doing undermining my message?" So a lot of
yeah,
Republican governors will feel, less maybe less pressure to do the wrong thing to placate, the president's feelings. So I think it will probably help on that front. And certainly, it seems like this vaccine is promising. Um, and not having, again, the like least competent set of individuals to ever run the United States government in charge of, vaccine distribution. They can't even get their supporters onto buses to leave the rallies. It's hard to imagine how they're going to get, 400 million doses of a vaccine manufactured, distributed through a strict cold chain. There's no way these morons would get anything like it done. And just the politicization, Trump coming out and saying, "Well, we're not going to send it to New York because the Cuomo didn't adequately lick my boots at key times, so there'll be no vaccines for me. Just that sort of vindictive pettiness, getting that out of the administration will, I think, help on the COVID front.
Yeah, I mean, there's like, I think people will realize how much is to be said for, just smooth, competent leadership. It's like you could argue oh, well, there's still, the swamp and there's still kickbacks and there's still big, all this stuff. But just having the machinery move in the way that it's supposed to, or having in terms of coronavirus, having a organized, response. Remember in the early days of this, when the states were fighting amongst themselves to get protective equipment for healthcare workers, because Trump was just like, maybe you should just get it yourself. Like, I'm just not going to do that. It's like there's certain things that a government can do really well, and that's one of those things is some of these logistic things. Yeah, so I think that's going to be a big thing. Your point that maybe Republican governors can now do things that they were afraid to do before for the sake of not drawing the ire of the president makes sense. But I think that there's going to be a lot of stuff where the damage is already done. So any Republican or Joe Biden administration official that goes out there and tries to implement some kind of measure, some kind of you know uh, shutting down of businesses or mass mandate or something, the damage is already done on that front. But so you're right. Trump was the one guy that that he actually could have made a difference, and he just chose not to. Um,
I look at Trump's coronavirus strategy as a guy. Let's say he's got like I'm going to try a basketball reference here, even though I'm a white Canadian, doesn't know much about it. So you got an open lane to the basket
To
for
the
an easy
hoop.
layup, to the hoop for a layup. And instead of taking that, you turn around and you try a full court shot at your own basket. And it's like, okay, so yeah, that's a low percentage shot. Not only is it a low percentage shot, but say you drain it, you still lost. It's your own
Yeah.
basket. What the fuck are you doing? Like, this mask thing is like Scott talks about putting Trump's name on masks. It's like for the guy that couldn't like try to sell steaks in a menswear store, it's like, why not just put Trump on a mask and sell it? Even if you don't believe it, you're going to make all sorts of completely legal money.
Yeah.
No problem. And instead, he's like, his ideas were not only am I not going to take this layup and sell masks for a large profit, I'm going to try and make sure everyone doesn't wear masks, and then make sure that no one can go to hotels and resorts and fuck myself over. It's like you had an opportunity to skim money off your government job, and you couldn't even do that right. Like,
Yeah.
my God.
And that seemed to
Like,
be the
what are
one
these
thing
people
that he
thinking?
wanted to do with his government job was skim money.
That's the only thing he wanted to do with it. And like, you have like this very easy opportunity, sell these Trump masks for $15 a piece
Yeah.
at a premium, and these people would have bought a fuck ton of them.
I got to say, your white Canadianness did show in your basketball metaphor. You neglected to say hoop or rack. I'm going to take it to the basket and go in for a layup. Come on. What
Okay, first of all, in Alberta, we only do
slam?
layups, and second of all, we don't actually have nets. It's still a peach basket with the bottom cut out of it.
And
You've been in Germany a bit too long, bud.
yeah, well, hey, this is the home of Dirk Nowitzki. Never forget, one of the greatest to ever do it.
Never forget, he's not dead. He's still alive.
Yeah, but I feel like he's been forgotten.
No one forgets about Dirk Nowitzki.
All right. Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm interested to see how the internal dynamics of the Democratic Party play out in this. I'm interested to see who the cabinet selections are going to be for Biden. I'll cover that when it happens. There was some talk that he should to really show good faith or whatever, he should put some Republicans in cabinet positions or
Oh,
something like that. But I think at this
fuck
time, yeah, you just got to get the most competent people for the job and just put them in and see what you can do for the first 2 years, see what happens with the Senate races. Let's wrap it up here. Anything else you guys want to hit on or looking forward to? The inauguration crowd. I think Biden should make a statement right away and say, "Don't come to the inauguration." It's a coronavirus risk. Don't come, or have like some kind of really spaced out thing, because he'll get hammered on that if he doesn't.
I just do it in the office. Well, it's like one last thing that Trump did this week that is just the perfect way to end his presidency is they had that million mega march yesterday, and all day they're claiming, they go back to the crowd size thing, they're claiming there's over 1 million Trump supporters in Washington, D.C. It's like, why do that to yourself? Like, first of all, no one's going to be excited to see a big crowd. And even if they are, just say that there's like 10,000. That's still a pretty good number for a super spreader event in 2020. Like, why handicap yourself with this stuff? Like, just do a nice, reasonable lie that everyone can believe.
Yeah. I don't know if he's capable of that. Scott?
I guess, yeah. My final thought, just looking back on this election, going into it, pre-COVID, I thought it was maybe a 50-50 shot, despite Trump being, like, in my mind, so obviously horrible. But and then with COVID, I figured it was then a slam dunk that, Trump was going to lose. And then it really, I would say I will admit, completely wrong about that. And I think Trump was an absolute slam dunk to get reelected before COVID. And then, I would say the loss is certainly not as narrow as it was painted, but it was not the sort of overwhelming repudiation I would have expected for a man who just, devastated the economy and more or less like could not have performed worse in response to this pandemic. So I don't know. It's definitely made me think. I would say it has reduced my faith in America and really lowered my expectations for Americans, to be perfectly honest. I read, a Twitter thread yesterday from a nurse in South Dakota about how people are literally, as they're being intubated, screaming at them about how COVID's a hoax and they should take all their PPE off because it's all a big lie. And I think, oh, good Lord, things might be worse than my worst case fear. So I'm very curious to see how the next few months and the next 4 years play out. But I don't know. Good luck, my Southern friends, because I would say all the Americans I meet in my life are just delightful, sensible, non-crazy people, which must, be my little liberal bubble. And chances are, let's say I met a lot of Americans when I was volunteering in Kenya, and you don't meet a lot of the Breitbart Tea Party crowd on volunteer trips in Africa. So you certainly don't get a representative sample of the American population. But the people I would meet would be absolutely delightful, sensible, rational folks who didn't have a bunch of crazy ideas about the world. And there are obviously many millions of them in America. They just seem to have to share their great landmass with some of the truly most misled people on earth. So I wish them all the power and good luck going forward to try and turn that ship around.
That's like saying, though, you met some very free thinking Americans on your like NPR discussion board that you went on.
All the Americans I meet on the NPR discussion board seem totally grounded in reality.
I go into the Facebook comment threads on Walmart. That's where I meet my Americans. You get the real America right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and like we said, we laugh and jest at poke fun at the Americans, but this kind of shit it can happen anywhere.
10 years.
And I think that's the important thing to take into consideration. We never thought it would happen in America, and look, it did. So, all right, gentlemen, thanks for doing it. Always a pleasure. We'll catch you next time.
Till next time.
Yeah, keep Steve Barg in your prayers today. Follow at Lionel Steele.
Nice, you got it in. There we go. Thanks to the boys for showing up for that one. Good chat, good times. I enjoyed it. If you enjoyed it, give us a like, give us a follow, give us a rate, give us a comment wherever you get your podcasts. Hit us up on Instagram or Twitter at 2bradforyou, or you can email the show at 2bradforyou@gmail.com. See the synergy there across platforms? Our website too, 2bradforyou@wordpress.com. 2bradforyou.wordpress.com. My apologies. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks to the guys again for being here. Yeah, please do reach out. We'd love to hear what you think. We'd love to take questions, comments, all of that kind of stuff, read them out on the show, whatever it is. So, at Two Bread for You on any channel, basically. We'll be there. Thank you again so much for listening. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah. Just start the podcast.
Computer repair with Steve Barg.
All right. Well, it's recording, so I'll get us started. I mean, it's going to be a little difficult with all the banging going on.
Listen, it hasn't stopped us before.
Yeah, it's
Make
true.
Make it a part of your humorous preamble intro to the show, you know?
No, all right.
People
Here
love
we
that.
go.
Do you have God powers? Can you just like mute Barg for this portion?
No, I don't, but I can edit him out.